Hey there, Bengals fans. It's Anthony Cosenza with the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast and CincyJungle.com. We have a very special episode because we have a very special guest to help us preview Week 10, Bengals at Steelers, none other than Ike Taylor, former Pittsburgh defensive back and current host of the Bleav in Steelers podcast. Mr. Taylor, how you doing, sir?
Good. How you doing?
Good. Hopefully you can hear us okay.
Yes,
Okay, awesome. Happy to have you with us and joining us. Ike Taylor's joining us as part of the Bleav in Steelers network, as well as from EAG Sports Management. We are happy to have his time. Look, we around the Bengals nation here, we call it Steelers Week, right? It's this big thing. It's big rivalry on our end. I guess you being a player for the Steelers, you had a great career, by the way. We're going to talk about that, but being a player for the Steelers and now covering it on the media side of things, is that a similar sentiment from the Pittsburgh side of the fence? Do they look at this game as a big deal like Bengals fans do, or is it kind of like it's the Bengals? And you can be honest.
it's in the division, so you got to look at it as a big game. Just being around the Kevin Colberts and the Mike Tomlins, you draft to beat who you're going to play twice in your division. If you're able to go, we got Cincinnati twice, got Baltimore twice, got Cleveland twice. If you're able to go 5-1 in your division, you give yourself a shot and the chance to make it to the Super Bowl. So you always look at divisional games and you always draft from how I was taught from the Pittsburgh Steelers to win your division. And that's the good thing about it. Everything else take care of itself. So, but to look at Cincinnati as like a rivalry, I don't think it really is a rivalry. I think for the most part, and this is just my personal opinion, Baltimore of some sort has been the rivalry. We've been at the top of the AFC North between Pittsburgh and Baltimore as far as like sharing Super Bowls or switching Super Bowls. It's been Baltimore or Pittsburgh. So a rivalry part, no. Handling your business in a division, which is the AFC North, that's what you always want to do. So just a little advice to anybody who's drafting whatever. When you drafting guys to win your division.
Yep. And look, a lot of Bengals fans may take that as a slight, but the record speaks for itself. I looked at it the other night. The Steelers are winning 65% of the games in this series. So, I mean, if it was 50-50, I'd see the argument there, but I understand that. You provide a nice segue to my next question because you mentioned a lot of the figureheads of the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're an organization that we on the Bengals side of things marvel at in terms of how they build their team. You yourself embody a Pittsburgh Steeler with your great career, solid player, 12-year career, just a really good player for this team for a long time. What is it about this culture that Pittsburgh breeds within its players, within its system? I mean, they've got that quote unquote special sauce, right? What is it in terms of their tough play? I mean, is that just kind of ingrained in you from day one when you get there, or is it a special breed of players that they look for? Is it a little bit of both? What's your take on that?
It's a little bit of both. So you have a tradition where in the 70s they won, 4 Super Bowls. And the reason and how they won Super Bowls was their physicality. So when you got guys like the Mean Joe Greens and Mean Joe Green, regardless on you want to talk about the Lynn Swans or the Terry Bradshaws or the Mel Blunts, all 4 of them guys, 3 of them guys I just named said it started with Mean Joe Green. And Mean Joe Green kind of set the standard on what it was to be a Pittsburgh Steeler and to play the game with some sort of physicality, because that's just football. I look at football as organized violence, regardless on how you want to look at it. So when you have that and those guys come around, the Rocky Bleivs come around, and you just see them day in and day out, you understand and you see like, man, this started with these guys, which are called the pioneers, if you got drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers, let alone being a free agent. So that's what embodies us. Then you get down to the Coach Cowher, who I've won a Super Bowl with. Then you get down to the Coach Tomlin. So Coach Tomlin, he's more of a hybrid coach. And what I want to mean by hybrid coach is He wants guys, he'll draft guys with some kind of physicality to embody the physical part of being a Pittsburgh Steelers, because Tomlin is a high IQ guy. He wants guys who smart and who just know the game of football. So he's going to do a little bit of both. So that's what you're seeing from the Pittsburgh Steelers. You know, it's been a foundation, it's been a legacy, it's been a tradition, and now you have a coach who wants and draft both. He wants a guy who can be physical, but he knows he can't draft all guys who are just straight physical. He need guys who physical, who need guys who with straight good IQ. So that's the good part. That's the best of both worlds what the Pittsburgh Steelers is getting with Coach Tomlin because of the rule change. And Coach T always embrace, you know, adversity and adjusting. You know, a lot of coaches, I don't think that they can adjust, but Coach Tomlin is one of them. You know, when you got a coach who gets down to his fourth string receiver and Duck Hodges and still go 8-8, that says a lot, because you got a lot of franchises who have their starting quarterback and still couldn't go 8-8. So Coach T is the right guy for this time frame. You know, he's the right guy to be a Pittsburgh Steelers head coach. He's the right guy with all the rule changes changing. He's the right guy who can adjust and understands, and it starts with him, let alone the Rooney family.
So you've played, speaking with Ike Taylor, by the way, folks, 12-year veteran, defensive back for the Pittsburgh Steelers, now host of the Bleav in Steelers on the Bleav Podcast Network. Happy to have him joining us on the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. You mentioned Coach Tomlin with the 8th win this last weekend against the Cowboys. He ensured that he will not have a losing season for the first time in his career. He's never had a losing season. He's gone 8-8, which is something to marvel at. He's a great coach. You also played for Bill Cowher, another great coach. What's the biggest difference between those guys, whether it's positive or negative, playing for both of those guys?
So both of the coaches between Coach Cowher and Coach Tomlin was players coaches. Coach Cowher came up in the era where it's all physicality. Like he loved that training camp, that 2-a-days, goal line 24/7, because the rules wasn't changed at the time. Coach T, you know, he was at that point in his career. Then when the rules have slowly started to change, he had to change as a coach. So that's what you got to like about the coaching standpoint of him, and it's the adjustment. You know, Coach T, it's a lot of good coaches. I don't think there's a lot of good coaches that can adjust. You know, and I think Coach T is one of them coaches who is a good coach, 1, 2, can adjust to certain situations, rule changes, and in the moment of the game. You know, so that's what I think what makes good coaches great. Your great coaches, they wind up adjusting. Your good coaches, they wind up saying, this is what we do. Coach Tomlin can be like, this is what we do, but at the same time, he's able to adjust during the game. So I play with a lot of Hall of Fame coaches. I think Coach T will make it to the Hall of Fame. I'm lying. I know Coach Tomlin will make it to the Hall of Fame. Coach Cowher is in the Hall of Fame. Dick LeBeau is in the Hall of Fame. Mike Mularkey is in the Hall of Fame. Russ Grimm is in the Hall of Fame. And I've played for a Hall of Fame owner in Papa Dan Rooney, as I would say. So I've just been surrounded by greatness when you want to talk about, you know, coaches who know how to coach and adjust in the NFL.
Like I said at the onset, man, that what the Steelers do and how they build their teams. I know Bengals fans are not fond of the Steelers, but they definitely are envious of them in the way they build their teams and their rosters and all of that, their approach to football. You played for those two coaches, but you also, when you faced the Bengals, faced 2 excellent receivers. You faced Chad Johnson / Ocho Cinco, and you also faced AJ Green. Who was the tougher matchup there? Because I think if you look at Ocho, if I'm not mistaken, the footwork was insane. And if you look at AJ, the length and the height, that provides a matchup problem. You're a bigger corner yourself too. But what do you see there? Well, who was the tougher matchup? And by the way, for folks who are too young to remember, Ike used to shut down Ocho pretty well. I remember it vividly. So you had some great games against Ocho. But that being said, who was the tougher matchup there between those two receivers on the Bengals end?
As far as like footwork, Ocho had the best footwork. Ocho made playing in the NFL like park ball. Ocho could have. Ocho did make running routes, stopping on a dime, easy. Ocho was tall. Ocho my height. Ocho is 6'2", so usually
Yeah.
6'2" guys, they're not really able to stop on a dime. Usually bigger receivers, they don't have what we call good Midas brakes. So if you know anything about cars and you go to Midas, you try to get the best brakes. Ocho had the best brakes as far as like stopping on a dime, getting in and out of his cuts. AJ Green was super athletic and stronger than what you thought he was. AJ Green was more of a basketball player, or is a basketball player playing football. He can high point the ball. He can get behind you any time of the day with his sneaky speed, and he was stronger than what you thought. So, them two brought something different in my mind to the table. But as far as like excellence, Ocho for the most part, I would give the edge because he was more healthier right now than AJ. If you catch a healthy AJ, you catching hell. That's what you catching. But that's how I look at them two quality receivers. Ocho at the time, he used to send Pepto Bismol to the facility because he felt like you know what he was gonna do on you. So
Yeah.
Ocho made it fun. Ocho made it fun. Nowadays you can't do that. Guys take it too seriously. But at the time, man, I respect and I'm cool with Ocho. I respect the hell out of him. AJ Green respect the hell out of him, even though he's a young buck, because man, I saw what he brought to the table. AJ Green made me step my game up. At the time, Ocho was a year or two in front of me, so I had to get my clout and my recognition off of Ocho. AJ Green coming in as a young stud, I had to maintain that. And every time I played AJ, he made me step my game up. So, of course, I think Cincinnati always to some degree draft some good wide receivers. I'm looking at T. Higgins from Clemson. He's a damn stud. Tyler Boyd, of course, he went to Pittsburgh. He's a damn stud in the slot. So, looking at Cincinnati, and when it comes down to drafting receivers, I mean, they had T.J. Houshmandzadeh. Who else they had? Chad Ocho at the time. RP Chris Henry. So, before we was looking at big threes, between Plexico Hines and Antoine Randall L that I got a chance to play with and practice against for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I was looking at Chris Henry, Ocho, and TJ Houshmandzadeh. So them boys always had a squad when it came down to the receiving point, let alone, a Carson Palmer at the time. So they drafted well, and to get off your question, what they got in Joe Burrow right now, I think Joe Burrow is a franchise quarterback.
Go ahead.
100%. I think Joe Cool. I call him Joe Cool. Y'all call him Joe Burrow. I think Joe Cool has everything it takes. 1-7, and 7 meaning Big Ben. Once Big Ben leaves, I think Joe Cool can take over the division if the coaching and the drafting part comes to par and seeing the kind of talent this guy have. This guy, he's a professional, and what I mean by that, he doesn't waver. He's been getting hit more than any other quarterback in the league. He doesn't throw anybody under the bus. He understands what he needs to do, and you can just see the growth and development in Joe Burrow of being a franchise quarterback. So I think in 3 to 5 years, we're going to be talking about Cincinnati, and the tides may change, and that's all because of the development of Joe Burrow. And I like what y'all got going on in Cincinnati.
So let's kind of continue on that. That was a nice segue. Talking with Ike Taylor, 12-year defensive back with the Pittsburgh Steelers, now host of the Bleav in Steelers on the Bleav podcast network. Happy to have him joining us, and hopefully we can hang on to you for a few more minutes. We appreciate the time, man. Look, you went up. You mentioned Carson Palmer. You faced Andy Dalton and a lot of different weapons there, and you've seen Joe Burrow now. Do you think that the ceiling is the highest of those three with the weapons that surrounded each guy? Do you think the ceiling for the Bengals is the highest currently right now because with Joe Burrow under center, or do you think they capped out with maybe Carson Palmer in 05. I mean, what's just kind of your gut feeling on that?
You give Joe Burrow there is no ceiling with Joe Burrow. I call that space. So it's hard to get up in space with a quarterback. And I think Joe Burrow can get up in space, all because his personality, all because his unselfishness, all because he's been going against the grain the last 3 years. You know, he was up at Ohio State. He was up at Ohio State, and he wasn't a starter. So he had to work his way through. He wound up switching and changing schools. He wound up going to LSU, wound up winning a starting job. And one thing about LSU, we do know they push out receivers. So it's like, dang, how all these first and second round receivers getting drafted, but they have no quarterback. You wind up putting Joe Burrow, Joe Cool, with some good talented receivers at LSU, you wind up winning a national championship. And what I like about Joe Burrow is just his knowledge and his placement of throwing the football, whether it's the fade, whether it's the back shoulder fade, whether it's getting his receivers down on the end cut to make sure his receivers don't get hit by a linebacker or safety. That's all placement. A lot of quarterbacks don't have placement. You know, either they throw the ball too soft or they throw the ball too hard or they have no touch. Joe Burrow can pretty much do it all. You know, so that's what I do like about Joe Cool.
So if from being a former defensive back like yourself, and you've got some high praise for Joe Burrow, looking at this week, week 10, what is the Steelers' best bet in terms of, you know, maybe limiting the damage from Joe Burrow? I mean, you know, he takes the hit, but he kind of keeps on coming later in the game. He's never really out of the game, so to speak. I mean, how would you attack a Joe Burrow this week, knowing the Steelers' defense intimately and you being a former defensive back?
Pressure. You apply pressure to any quarterback. You know, this isn't Joe Burrow's first time under center. You know, we're damn near halfway during the season. So, regardless on whether you're a GOAT quarterback or whether you're a rookie quarterback, you apply pressure, man, and you put your guys in man coverage. And that's what Pittsburgh does well. Pittsburgh put pressure, they hit the quarterback, and they get sacks. Between TJ, between Cam, between Stephon Tuitt, between, you know, Bud Dupree. Them boys know how to get to quarterbacks. Vince Williams, them boys know how to get to quarterbacks. So right now, I'm just making that statement. I'm going to try to hit Joe Burrow early and often. I'm going to let him know we coming. You're not going to sit back and try to pick us apart.
Talking with Ike Taylor, host of the Bleav in Steelers podcast, part of the Bleav Podcast Network. Going to be spending a couple more minutes with him talking about Week 10, Bengals at Steelers. Look, the Steelers are 8-0, and they're very good. They've got a lot of talent in a lot of different places. Ben's back, playing pretty well, but they've had some close calls. I would say it's an imperfect team with a perfect record at this point in time. What do you think if the Bengals are to have a chance? It might be a snowball's chance in hell at this point, but if they were to have a chance to win this game, what would you say that the Bengals need to exploit in terms of potential weaknesses for the Steelers?
There's really no weakness for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think the only slight edge you might say is the running game. I think the running game for the Pittsburgh Steelers has to be more consistent. And they know going into the playoffs, that's what you're going to have is a nice little running game to balance out defense on staying on the sideline, let alone with a passing game and play action. So that's what they have to do. The Pittsburgh Steelers, I like their momentum, and it's crazy. They're 8-0 and they haven't played their best ball. So Pittsburgh Steelers getting to the latter part of the season, going into the playoffs, playing their best ball. I think they're the most complete team. I don't think whether you're a fantasy guy like I am, they're not going to gain all the points you want unless you have the Pittsburgh Steelers defense like I do. But at the same time, if you're just looking at it from a coach's standpoint, it's like, damn, we 8-0 and we still haven't played our best ball. You know, the only really blowout game you had was against Cleveland. I think that was 38-7. Yeah. Other than that, man, we're not looking for blowouts because once we get to the playoffs, there is no such thing as blowouts. You're going to be behind 8-10. Pittsburgh has been behind 8-10. I think the last week was 14 for him. So it's been a tough sled. But when you got guys who understand and rally and they don't panic, now we're talking about playoff football. So just imagine we as in the Pittsburgh Steelers, haven't played our best ball yet in the latter times of the season. When we do, it's going to be hell for the NFL.
It's interesting. I said it's an imperfect team with a perfect record, and you said they haven't played their best ball yet. I'm more inclined maybe to agree with you. You know football a lot better than I do, my friend. So I am more inclined to agree with you, and I never count the Steelers out, ever. So how do you see this one playing out this week? What are some of the keys to the game from the Pittsburgh Steelers side of the football to get out and become 9-0 this week?
Pittsburgh got to run the ball. If Pittsburgh have the same game plan they had against the Dallas Cowboys, they're going to lose. They ran the ball, but they didn't run the ball efficiently. Pittsburgh also has to stop the run because the Dallas Cowboys ran the ball pretty well on the Pittsburgh Steelers. If the Cincinnati Bengals establish a running game, they will come out with a W, guarantee.
Talking with Ike Taylor, 12-year defensive back with the Pittsburgh Steelers, part of the Bleav podcast network, host of the Bleav in Steelers podcast. Where can people find that podcast? Where is it on audio platforms, video platforms? How can people listen to get some Steelers news, get a little bit of info from the other side of the fence?
You can catch me on Ike_swagging on Twitter. You can catch me on Ike Taylor, a.k.a. One of a Kind, on Instagram. Bleav in Steelers podcast. I got my guy Mark Bergen. He's my co-host, so we always try to rock and roll with that.
Awesome. It's been a pleasure having you on, man. I appreciate you giving us some insight. We'll definitely be checking out your podcast. If you want to, we'd love to have you back on for the rematch later in the year if you want to. We'd love to have you back on if you'd like to, but appreciate it. This has been awesome, man. Immense pleasure on our part.
Appreciate it. Holla at me. I'm always here for you.
All right. Take it easy. That's Ike Taylor, 12-year defensive back, Pittsburgh Steeler. He knows a thing or two about football, folks. And I'm seeing some comments. Some think that was cool that we had him on. Some because of their anti-Steeler bias, they're a little upset about that. But hey, I thought he was awesome. Really nice guy, and really, really cool to have. Look, Bleav. I don't know if you guys know this, but the Bleav podcast network, a lot of their deal. By the way, our friends Daddio and Hoji, who were once part of our network, have moved over to Bleav. They were part of the SB Nation network, and they moved over to the Bleav podcast network. Bleav hires a lot of former players to host their podcasts, so they bring a really unique perspective. We've been fortunate enough. We had just now Ike Taylor for the Steelers. We had Eric Davis, defensive back for the San Francisco 49ers and the Bleav in 49ers podcast. We had they got us Takeo Spikes, former Bengals linebacker, played a long time in the NFL. They have been great to us, so we appreciate we appreciate them being so kind to us and getting us a lot of different guests so far. Some of you may have been or are simultaneously tuning into a super show that's part of the Cincy Jungle podcast network. Ace, Zim, Matt Minnick, John Sheeran. I was on the first part of that show, but I came back here to interview Ike Taylor, which was awesome. So we're bringing you all kinds of different coverage for the Bengals and Steelers. I'm going to be with you a couple more minutes here because there has been some news along the Bengals front as of Wednesday. There's been a little bit of news here. So we want to cover that. We want to talk about that. Our thanks again to Ike Taylor, to the Bleav Podcast Network, and to EAG Sports Management for having Ike Taylor on. That was fun, man. That was fun. I wanted to throw a little bit more, I don't know. I was going to maybe talk about the Hushmanzada towel thing, but I feel like that's, I don't know. Maybe that was a little over. Maybe that's been talked about a lot, but anyway, let's talk about an addition the Bengals made today on Wednesday. That was defensive end Takarist McKinley, former Atlanta Falcon. They tried to trade him before the deadline. Didn't really get much any good offers for him. So they decided to get rid of him. He was on waivers, and the Bengals ended up picking him up off of waivers. So, real quickly, this is the article on CincyJungle.com, in case you were wondering. He is a former first-round pick out of UCLA. Look, this was a guy that was a fast riser that draft. He was kind of a, maybe second-round guy, getting some late buzz, and then he ended up kind of in the middle of that first round. And he's had a couple of rough seasons of late, but he started off pretty well. He was a guy that, was doing some things early in his career. He's got 17 and a half career sacks, had 13 of those his first 2 seasons and only 4.5 the past 2. So, hasn't been lighting the world on fire. I think he only played in 4 games. I'll show you something in just a second here. Only played in 4 games so far this year. Here's some stats. Here's the 4 games so far this year. Has the 1 sack. He had the 1 sack in week 1. Atlanta's been terrible this year, by the way, so that's not helping matters. But you see here, 6 sacks as a rookie, 7 sacks his second year, and then all of a sudden you got the 3.5 and 3.5 in 14 games last year, and then 1 sack. So, obviously production dipped quite a bit, but a guy, look, this screams Bengals type of signing, free agency signing. This is a guy, a former first-round pick, has tapered off in terms of production. He's got a lot to prove. The Bengals can get him on the cheap. They've got him for half a year. They don't have the 5th-year option pick that's tagged to this, so they can see what he's got for 7 games and then 8 games, and then see if he's someone they want to hang on to as the year progresses. We'll see, but a guy that will definitely boost. Even if it's as a rotational guy, will definitely boost the pass rush. Sam Hubbard is coming back. We'll talk more about that in just a second. Sam Hubbard is coming back. Carl Lawson's been playing pretty well, but he needs some help. And that was a guy that Carl Lawson's a guy that needs some help in terms of ancillary players around him. Geno Atkins has not been able to be the old Geno because of injuries and being out of the lineup, et cetera. DJ Reader is now gone on IR, and the Bengals need to generate pressure. This was a good move by them. Even if it's a rental deal for the rest of the year, it was a good move by them. So, look, I see some people mentioning Dunlap. Look, the Bengals didn't do much on the trade deadline, either dealing guys or getting another player or what have you. They did deal Carlos Dunlap, but in the last 2 weeks, they grabbed BJ Finney, they grabbed Quentin Spain, and they grabbed Takaris McKinley in the last 2 weeks. So their 2 biggest areas of need, their offensive and defensive line, they've tried to address it with some of the biggest and best names that are available out there. Finney, you can argue about that, but it's kind of get what you can at that point for Dunlap. But Spain was basically the best interior lineman that was available at that point. And, of course, McKinley, edge rushers come at a premium, even if it's a guy who's been dipping in production. Edge rushers come at a premium. So you gotta tip your cap, I guess, a little bit to the Bengals, saying, we're not going to just sit around and continue on our 2-5-1 path. We're gonna do some different things. So here's some more news here. By the way, we didn't really get to our Monday news jump this week as we usually do, so I'm kind of getting to a little bit more news. This is going to be interesting to see how the team plays this one out, but the Bengals activated Xavier Su'a-Filo. So he, I think, only played 2 games, and left week 1 against the Chargers. That's right. So he has been out with an ankle injury since, and he is now cleared to play. So I don't know what the Bengals are going to be doing on the offensive line. Su'a-Filo has been a career left guard. They signed him in all likelihood to place him at right guard, which he has barely played any snaps at all. He's been a average-ish, at least by Pro Football Focus metrics. He's been an average-ish offensive lineman his career. But there was kind of a flash in the pan handful of games for the Cowboys when he came in and spot started for them, and he really boosted up his scores and boosted what the Cowboys were trying to do. And the question is, can he bring that over to the Bengals and fit in well to their system on the offensive line, or was Suafilo kind of surrounded with some talent on the offensive line and a lot of different weapons on offense to kind of mask some deficiencies? Maybe it's a little bit of both. Obviously, the Bengals like what he was going to be bringing, and he was starting right guard this year. And since the Bengals have cycled through a lot of different guys, Fred Johnson got a start. Alex Redmond's been starting. He's provided a little bit of steadiness. I mean, there's been a revolving door on the offensive line. So Xavier Suafilo is back. The Bengals did place Winston Rose on the COVID-19 list. So as the season's going on, unfortunately, some more names are landing on that. Right now, I'm seeing here Brandon Benatti Holiday asking about Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon is in that lovely category of being day-to-day. So, it's kind of a wait-and-see thing there. Going back to McKinley real quick, McKinley, I don't know that he will play this week which is unfortunate because you want to have all hands on deck with the pass rush against Big Ben, and who knows if he's even playing. He's got the knee problem from last week. He was put on the COVID list, so it's like, but you want all the able pass rushers that you can get. Unfortunately, I think because of the COVID protocol, you've got to wait as someone comes in and is signed as a free agent. You got to wait, I think, a week. But we'll see. We'll see. It's kind of been a fluid situation. I mean, we thought that may have been the case with Quentin Spain, but he came in and played a couple days later. So, who knows? But I'm not really expecting to see Tack McKinley this week. I think it may be next week, but we'll see. We'll see. By the way, for those wondering about the McKinley, going back to him, wondering about the waiver situation and how that works. A lot of people think that, just because the Bengals had priority waiver status throughout the offseason and right after final cuts, et cetera, that carries through the season. That's not necessarily the case. As I understand it, basically what happens is it's a fluid thing that changes as records change throughout the year. So as the Bengals win or lose games, and other teams win or lose games, the waiver wire order shifts, and then it kind of goes in place there. So my understanding is that I think the Raiders placed a waiver claim, but they have a better record than the Bengals, so they were back in line. And the Bengals weren't first in line at 2-5-1 either. There were a handful of teams in front of them that did not place a waiver claim on Tack McKinley. So the Bengals were able to land him, and it was a good move there. So that's kind of the news so far. I guess we could look real quickly at the injury report, and we'll bring that up in just a second. But like I said, Bengals are getting some guys back. I mentioned this. Sam Hubbard was activated back to the Bengals roster from IR return. So that's good news, at least, especially this week, because if we don't know exactly what's going on with Tack McKinley, if he's going to play, that's good news there. Let's look at the injury report. I have this ready to be pulled up here. Here it is on cincyjungle.com, courtesy of my usual co-host, John Sheeran. And let's scroll it on down here. Here you go, right here. Here's the Bengals injury report as of Wednesday. Geno Atkins had a rest day, a personal day. You've got Bobby Hart out, so I don't know if that's going to be Hakeem Adeniji or Fred Johnson time, but Fred Johnson's been on the COVID-19 list, so we'll see what happens there. Joe Mixon did not practice with that foot injury he suffered a couple of weeks ago. Darius Phillips with the groin injury that he suffered against Tennessee and left that game, he did not practice. You've got Jonah Williams, who had that neck injury against Tennessee. He was limited. We'll see what happens there. I'd like to think that he plays at left tackle. Would be a nice addition back, but we'll see. And then Trey Hopkins, who also left the Titans game with a concussion, was full practice. Samaje Perine has a knee ding, but he was full practice there. As you look to the Pittsburgh Steelers, Juju Smith-Schuster, a knee injury, did not practice on Wednesday. You've got some other guys here, full practice for Hilton and Watt, so not an issue there. Marquise Pouncey David DeCastro, Villanueva, Ebron, and Tuitt all did not practice, not injury related. You got to think that's veteran rest there. And then you've got Tyson Alualu and Isaiah Buggs. Both those are limited and did not practice. So a couple of important players on this list either did not practice or limited, but I think a lot of these, as you look towards the middle of this injury report, those are maybe some veteran rest days there. I want to say this, and Ike Taylor talked about it a little bit. It's all about the Steelers' defensive front for me in this game. I mentioned a lot of those names, Alualu and Tuitt. Cameron Hayward. I've always thought Cameron Hayward was a good player, just a good player. He's a very good player. He's huge, does a lot of things. I've watched more and more of him recently. That guy's an outstanding football player, and I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that already probably knew that. I always just said, yeah, he's good. He's good. I mean, the more I watch him, I really paid close attention to him this last week against Dallas, and he was just living in the Cowboys' backfield. It was incredible, just throwing. At one point, I think he threw an offensive lineman into another guy and knocked him off of a block. I mean, it was just incredible what that guy is doing. And like I said, I've always known he's been good, and I've seen him do some things to wreak havoc against the Bengals. But that guy, to me, I think as he goes there. I mean, I know you can talk about Watt, you can talk about Tuitt, and all these other guys. As he goes, to me, I think the other guys kind of go. Dupree, another guy, and that's why the Bobby Hart injury. I know Bobby Hart's everybody's favorite whipping boy. He has played better in recent games before getting hurt recently. Who knows what's going on with Jonah Williams? Hopefully he comes back this week. He was limited on Wednesday, as I said. That's why those bookend tackles are of immense importance this week. And if for some reason the Bengals are forced to go with, Fred Johnson and Adeniji, does that, this week, are they going to hold up the way they did against the Titans? The Steelers' pass rush is better than the Tennessee's a good team. Don't get me wrong, and they've got a pretty decent defense, but their pass rush is nothing compared to what the Steelers bring. So if you're going to trot out Adeniji and Johnson again, you better be pretty confident that they'll be able to repeat a performance or even better a performance as they did in Tennessee. So that's something to think about. Again, I'm Anthony Cosenza with CincyJungle.com and the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. We wanted to bring a special episode because of our special guest, Ike Taylor, former defensive back of the Pittsburgh Steelers, joining us courtesy of the Bleav podcast network, and he is one of the hosts of the Bleav in Steelers podcast. A lot of fun talking with him, reliving some days of his career, reliving some days of him going against the Cincinnati Bengals, and previewing this game going forward. A lot of fun, nice guy, even though he's a Steeler. The Bleav Network and EAG Sports Management, two great companies, they approached us about having him on, and I said, for sure we're having him on, because I thought it was going to be a really interesting conversation, and it was. So our thanks to him, our thanks to both of those companies as well. So go check out his podcast. He's probably got a lot to say this week. I know I will. So go check him out. Appreciate his time. Wanted to give you a little bit more insight as to what's going on with the Cincinnati Bengals. Thanks for tuning into this show. Be sure to check out the Super Show as well. Both of these will be on all YouTube channels, whether it's New Stripe City, the Orange and Black Insider, or all of the audio channels. It'll all be on there. So check it out. Appreciate the support, and we will see you soon. Enjoy Steelers week. We've got more coming at you towards the weekend. Keep it tuned to Cincy Jungle and our podcast network. Thanks.